Order. I call this meeting of the Special Committee to review the estimates of the Chief Electoral Officer and the Auditor General to order. By way of background, Section 16 of the Auditor General Act requires the Auditor General to present annually to a committee of the host of assembly, designated for that purpose by the host, estimates of the sums of monies that will be required by the Auditor General to conduct the activities required that act and any other enactment or authority, together with any estimated recoveries. Section 19 of the Elections Act provides for the same in relation to the Chief Electoral Officer. The Special Committee was established under Resolution Number 3211 of the 61st General Assembly, 3rd Session, and Resolution Number 2559 of the 61st General Assembly, 4th Session, as the committee so designated. Those resolutions provide that the Special Committee is composed of the members appointed from time to time to the host of Assembly Management Commission and is chaired by the Chair of the Management Commission. This Special Committee has the power to alter the estimates being considered by it, and upon completing its review shall recommend the estimates as altered if not to the Treasury and Policy Board for inclusion in the government's estimates. Let's begin by having the members of the Special Committee introduce themselves. I will start, and then we will move clockwise around the table after me. My name is Danielle Barkos, Speaker of the House, MLA for Chester St. Margaret's, Chair of the Special Committee.
John White, MLA for Glace-Bain Dominion.
Good afternoon, everyone. Brendan McGuire, Halifax Atlantic.
Becky Druin, Lunenburg West.
Good afternoon, everyone. Marco McLeod, MLA Pictou West.
Good afternoon, everyone. Derek Mumberkid, MLA, Sydney, Member 2.
Hello, Susan LeBlanc, MLA for Dartmouth North.
Hi, I'm Lisa LaChance, MLA for Halifax, Citadel, Sable Island.
Thank you, everyone. I note that under Section 16 of the Auditor General's Act and Section 19 of the Elections Act, that the Chair of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts is also entitled to attend this committee meeting. Currently, the Chair of Public Accounts is Susan LeBlanc, who is already present in her capacity as a member of the Special Committee. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of James Charlton, Chief Clerk of the House, and Gordon Hebb, Chief Legislative Counselor. I now invite the Chief Electoral Officer to present her estimates for the 2025-26. I ask that you begin by introducing yourself and any other staff from Elections Nova Scotia who are accompanying you before giving your remarks.
Thank you very much. My name's Dorothy Rice. I'm the Chief Electoral Officer here in Nova Scotia, having just gone through the elections, so you may have seen me before. And this is Lee Chow, who's our Chief Financial Officer, who will be actually presenting the opening remarks regarding the budget.
Perfect. Please present.
Okay, go ahead.
I recognize Mrs. Chow.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to present our 2025-26 budget request. Elections Nova Scotia is an independent, nonpartisan agency that reports to the members of the House of Assembly through the Speaker. Our mission to deliver provincial elections impartially and professionally is drawn from the Elections Act. My presentation of our budget estimates to you provides transparency and accountability to the members of the Assembly. As outlined in our budget submission, an additional $2.8 million is required for 2025-26 to continue to fulfill our mandate. This amount includes $1.5 million to purchase new IT equipment in preparation for the next election. Approximately 1,100 pieces of IT equipment used in the last 3 general elections have reached the end of the life cycle and must be replaced to ensure security and connectivity. $839,000 to wrap up the 42nd provincial general election. Major activities planned for the upcoming fiscal year include compliance review of candidate financial reports, post-event debrief, as well as decommission of tech equipment, and $260,000 for one potential by-election. This is based on historical occurrence and costs. $100,000 for outreach strategy to support our inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility programming. And lastly, $54,000 for external legal counsel. I respectively request that you accept our budget as presented and recommend it without alteration to Treasury and Policy Board. I commit to sending a report to members of this committee summarizing any changes made once our final 2025-26 budget is approved by Treasury and Policy Board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions? I recognize the honorable member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you very much. Just a quick question. I'm having a hard time with my computer today, so I can't correctly see the what you've sent. But you've said that you're asking for an additional $2.8 million. And can you just remind us, last year, Elections Nova Scotia asked for an increase, and then the committee approved it, but then it wasn't in the budget. So is this a similar ask to last year? Can you refresh our memory?
I recognize Mrs. Chow.
So it's not similar to last year's. Last year, we primarily asked for election readiness costs and also funding for the tech on election day for digital strike-off. So this year's ask pivoted since we already had the election. So we are asking for additional funding to purchase new IT equipment for the next coming election, and also funding to wrap up the 42nd general election happened last November.
Is there any other questions? I recognize the honorable member for yes, member 2.
Thank you. We'll get it right someday. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question around the technology piece. So you said that it's reached its end of life. Did you have any issues during the election with the current equipment that you had? Is that why you're making the request now? Is that is it an expansion of what you already have, or you're saying that the equipment that you have now is going to be obsolete for the next election?
I recognize Mrs. Chow.
So no, we don't have any issues with tech equipment for the past general election. Our tech equipment are used in rotation, so certain life cycles, some of them are 10 years, some of them are 8, some of them are 5. So this is just the refresh of we have to make sure we have new equipment because they are obsolete by the time next election comes.
I recognize the honorable member for Halifax Citadel Sable Island.
Hi, thanks. So you mentioned your funding for inclusion programming and that sort of thing. Certainly, during the course of the past election, there were, I certainly felt like seniors, students, and folks, trans folks who had changed their name faced exclusion from certain aspects and certain ways of being able to vote. So I'm just wondering what your plans are with the inclusion funding that you're asking for.
I recognize Mrs. Rice.
Thanks very much for your question. We have had a committee, and based on our strategy to address inclusion issues and diversity issues, and we had struck that committee leading up to this general election, and we had a lot of work planned to roll out for the July date. Unfortunately, we weren't able to pull that to full fruition. We were fortunate. We did have 3 special polls that were set up during the November election. One at CNIB, one at Member 2, and I can't remember with anyway at Dalhousie. Anyhow, so we do have plans to expand that activity, and we have members from communities across the province who are contributing to that work that we're doing within our organization. Yeah. So next time, we'll probably have a lot more fulsome rollout for that area of need for our voters. Yeah.
I recognize the honorable member for Halifax Atlantic.
Thank you. I had a question about 2 questions. One about which technology is being replaced for the $2.8 million. You say we're replacing technology and it only has an 8 to 10 year lifespan. So what technologies is that? And secondly, like you're talking about the rollout for the inclusion, which is excellent, and adding more polls. But will any of this money actually go into polls in communities like my community, for example, where we were entire parts of the community were missing polls, Herring Cove, Sambro. There was no polling station in those communities. So you talk about like expanding. How much of that is actually going toward, I don't mean the inclusion amount, I mean the 2.8 million, to make sure that we're able to set up these polls in communities during elections?
I recognize Mrs. Rice.
I appreciate very much your question, and our intent is to always have polls set up in the communities where we have historically established polls and in new communities if the need exists. So after each general election, we have a lot of debrief sessions with the parties and with different people within our communities, returning officers. And this area, if it has been brought to light for us, it'll be on our action plan for the next time.
I recognize Mrs. Chow.
So we are replacing $1.5 million to replacing laptops, which is life cycle 5 years, and laser printers we use for the election, which is a life cycle of 10 years. And we're also replacing the turbo hops we have to use for internet connection. We must replace them because the current ones we use is no longer permitted to use in Canada.
Just a follow up to that.
I usually do follow-ups as long as everybody doesn't mind. I will continue with that. It didn't seem to be any earlier, but okay, yes, please. I recognize the honourable member for Halifax Atlantic.
So who sets the standards on the laptops and the laser printers? Because I've had a laser printer in my office now for 12 years, and I've had a laptop in my office for 12 years, and the computer in my office for 10 years. Like, why are the laptops, why do they have to be replaced every 5 years, and why do laser printers have to be replaced every 10 years?
I recognize Mrs. Rice.
I'll respond to that question. The computers that we are using we have used for the last general election have been used for 3 elections. So they've used well in excess of the 5-year lifespan for that equipment. And so that is why we're wanting to replace that at this time. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. I recognize the honourable member for Halifax Citadel Sable Island.
I'm trying to recall, there was a pilot for online voting, right? But not like true online voting in Nova Scotia. Was there not perhaps for like retired or for folks in the forces and that sort of thing? And I'm just wondering, there was an increased use of like the iPad voting and that sort of stuff. But that, I mean, people, especially in Halifax, where they had just voted online, really want to know when they can vote online. So I'm wondering, where is that in the planning?
I recognize Mrs. Rice.
Thanks very much. So we did have a plan to roll out internet voting for the military members who are stationed outside of Nova Scotia. With the timing of the election, had it taken place in July, we might have had a better chance to do that, but we had to abandon that plan. So we went back to the mail-in ballots for that group. And we've had a lot of requests come in for internet voting through the candidates, because that's the feedback we're getting on the street. And that is not currently in our plan for legislation. We were trying to introduce internet voting in a very measured and conservative manner, so that's where that has come from.
Do you have, I recognize the honourable member for Member 2.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in regards to your ask for the increase in technology, a big part of the issue on Election Day was that the site actually crashed when people went looking for where to vote. So as part of that, are you guys looking at that too as well as in your ask that we don't run into that situation again?
I recognize Mrs. Rice.
Thanks very much. Yes, we did have the internet did go down for an hour early in the day, and it was rectified very quickly. We did work very quickly with ICTS to solve that problem in the field, and so we were back up and running by 9:30 in the morning. And we have recognized that that has been a gap in our system. We had added a lot of capacity to the internet before Election Day, but it wasn't sufficient. So we are working with ICTS on that, and we will certainly mitigate that for the next time.
I recognize the honourable member for Sydney, member 2, for his follow-up question.
Yeah, so I appreciate that answer. It was a big concern for folks, and without the voter information cards, as everyone knows around the table, it became very problematic because people they didn't know where they were going. So are you looking at that in your technology kind of review? Are you looking at other avenues where you can get that information? I've been through 5 elections, and I never realized how important those voter information cards are for people that they're getting in the mail, which I would never suggest to get rid of. But are you looking at different avenues through your ask to Treasury Board to help promote even more where people actually have to go and vote?
I recognize Mrs. Wright.
So is your question regarding people voting with technology or people having access to find out where to vote through the technology?
I recognize the honourable member for Sydney, member 2.
Yeah, I think.
I recognize the honourable member for Sydney, member 2.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yeah, that's my question. Sorry, I kind of danced around it a little bit. The big issue was voter information cards weren't available. People didn't know where to vote. The website crashed for an hour, and people were scrambling to try to find where to vote. So, in your technology review, are you looking at where you can, provide more information for people to vote?
I recognize Mrs. Rice.
Thanks very much for that clarification. Yes, of course, we are reviewing what options are available to increase the availability of the technology to find out where people can vote and other information related for the voters. We've had across Canada issues with misinformation and disinformation, and across Canada, all of the CEOs are addressing this, and we're kind of learning from each other from how they're addressing these problems. Yeah.
I recognize the honourable member for Halifax Atlantic.
Just to jump on the mumbo train there with the voter ID cards. Obviously, it was a big issue during the election. The reason given, rightfully so, is that there was a potential strike, and there ended up being obviously some work action done. But what I'm trying to understand is, and I guess we're a little bit off topic here, but there was cards sent out to every Nova Scotian on how to vote after the writ was dropped and after the polls were in place. So if you sent out cards on how to vote, why wasn't the card sent out on where to vote?
I recognize Mrs. Rice.
And go ahead.
So we are a little bit off topic for the budget exercise. I think we're kind of into a debrief process here. Nonetheless, the answer is that as soon as we had those cards prepared and ready to go, so as soon as the writ was issued, we were able to send them out. Then we had to find all of our polling locations, which takes several days into the election. And so by the time we had all of those ready to signed leases with all of the community halls and the churches and wherever else we vote, by the time we had all of those in place, the strike was imminent. So that was why there's a difference in the timing of when different materials are sent out, right? Yeah.
I recognize the honourable member for Glace Bay Dominion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just because we're talking about online technology, you made me think about the military voting online. So can you give us any information on that? Is that reflected in this ask that you're doing with the increase of technology? Is that to do with military voting online? Is there any part of that aspect of it?
I recognize Mrs. Rice.
The technology ask isn't specifically related to the military voters. The ask is for the technology to be refreshed because it's been through 3 elections already. So by the time we got to the next general election, perhaps in 4 years or so, we would expect that technology will be very, very old by then. Yeah.
Is there a follow-up? No, okay. I recognize the honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just want to quickly, before I say what I think about the ask that's in front of us, address a bit of an elephant in the room, which is that we had a snap election. And so I, for one, I'm not surprised that everything didn't go perfectly with Elections Nova Scotia in the election. I think it is, when last we met here with the staff from Elections Nova Scotia, we were working on a premise of a fixed election date, which I will remind you I will remind the room, was set for July of 2025. And so we were all under that assumption, and I think that Elections Nova Scotia, I mean, of course, there's always issues and there's always improvements, but I think, in fact, I would say, did the best they could under the circumstances. But given that, Madam Chair, what I'd like to say is thinking about the things that can go wrong and thinking about how important elections are, I would hate to know that the computer systems and the computer equipment that we'd be using in the next election, whether it be 3 or 4 years or however long, would be so old that it could possibly crash. So I think this is a very important ask, and I think we should support it.
Thank you for bringing it back to the budget. I just want to remind all the members that we are here to talk today about the budget, and I'd like to keep it on topic. I recognize... No? Nobody. Rhetorical question. I recognize a rhetorical question from the honourable member from Dartmouth North.
Oh, that wasn't a rhetorical question. It was a statement.
Fair. Okay, so is there any other questions? Okay, would somebody care to move the special committee approve the estimates of the electrical chief? So moved by Brendan McGuire. Will all those in favour of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I now invite the Auditor General to present her estimates for the 2025-26. I ask that you begin by introducing yourself, and you have no staff, before giving your remarks. I recognize the Auditor General.
Thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. Kim Adair, Auditor General. My budget ask this year is relatively straightforward. I'm going to speak mainly from page 2 of the document that's been shared with you. Essentially, what we're asking for is what I would call a status quo budget. It's $6.7 million for a staff of 43 people, FTEs. That number ties in with the budget target that we have been given by Finance and Treasury Board. I would note that over the past few years, we have been given some additional funding for the health audit function. We're now at roughly $1.1 million in additional funding that came in gradually over 3 years, and 6 FTEs. So we have just recently been staffed up for all 6 of those positions, and we're nicely have some momentum on that function and are doing a number of health audits. Most of our budget is salaries, about 80%. So the increase that you see year over year is essentially the economic increase that comes from finance centrally. And during the year, we had a reclassification of some of our audit managers and audit principals. So that's what's driving that roughly $500,000 increase year over year. So it's pretty straightforward, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? I see none. Would someone care to move that the special... Oh, I see one. I recognize the honourable member for Glace Bay Dominion. He's moving it. Oh, are you moving?
Yeah, I'm moving it.
Okay. Will all those in favor of...
You need a seconder.
Commission.
It's not a management commission.
It's just a committee, so it doesn't need a second.
It's not a committee of the House, is it?
Yeah.
Will all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary-minded, nay? The motion is carried. Thank you. That completes the agenda for the special committee meeting. I remind the members of this committee, all of whom are also members of the House of Assembly Management Commission, that a meeting of the Management Commission will occur after a brief pause. Please remain at your seats as we intend to get underway very shortly. With that, the special committee now stands adjourned. Order. I call this meeting of the House of Assembly Management Commission to order. Let's begin by having the members of the Management Commission introduce themselves. I will start, and then we will move clockwise around the table. My name is Danielle Barkos, Speaker of the House, MLA for Chester St. Margaret's, and Chair of the Management Committee.
Good afternoon. I'm John White, MLA for Glace Bay and Dominion.
Brandon McGuire, Halifax Atlantic. Good to see you.
Becky Druin, Lunenburg West. Hello.
Good afternoon, Marco McLeod, MLA Pictou West.
Good afternoon, Derek Marquette, MLA Sydney, Member 2.
Good afternoon, Susan LeBlanc, MLA for Dartmouth North.
Hi, Lisa Lachance, Halifax, Little Sable Island.
I would also like to acknowledge the presence of James Charlton, Chief Clerk of the House, Gordon Hebb, Chief Legislative Counsel, and Karen Howard, Acting Director of Administration and Operations. The first item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of the last meeting of the Management Commission, which occurred on May 22nd, 2024. The draft minutes were circulated in advance of today's meetings. Are there any questions, comments, or changes to the minutes? Would someone like to move that the draft minutes of the meeting of the Management Commission on May 22, 2024 be adopted? Got any takers here? Sure. Okay. Moved by MLA McGuire. Will someone second the motion? Seconded by MLA Mombercat. The next item on the agenda, yeah. Vote. Will all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary-minded, nay? The motion is carried. The next item on the agenda is the appointment of 2 members of the Management Commission to the Audit Committee. The Audit Committee consists of 2 non-MLAs appointed by the Chief Justice of Nova Scotia with knowledge and experience in financial matters who are suitable to represent the public interest. These persons are Gordon Moore, Chief of Audit Committee, and Susan McIsaac, both of whom have a background in public accountancy and are in their second and final fourth-year term as members. The other two members of the Audit Committee are members of the Management Commission selected by the Commission, of whom at least one must not be a member of the government party. The term of the previous MLA members of the Audit Committee, those being myself and the Honourable Derek Mombercat, were terminated when the House was dissolved for last year's general election. Our practice has traditionally been to have one of the government representatives on the Management Commission serve alongside of one official opposition representatives. I understand from the Chief Clerk that the Government Caucus is nominating MLA McLeod for the Audit Commission, and that the official opposition caucus is nominating MLA Lachance. With that in mind, would someone move that Marco McLeod and Lisa Lachance be appointed to the Audit Committee, each for a term commencing January 29th, 2025, and continuing until the member ceases to be a member of the Management Commission or is replaced as a member of the Audit Committee by the Management Commission, whichever first occurs? May I have someone move this? So moved by the Honourable Member of Dartmouth North. Do we have a seconder? So moved by the Honourable Member of Glace Bay Dominion. Will all those in favour of the motion please say aye? Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. That concludes our agenda for today. We will have more business to transact, including the review of financial statements and the acceptance and approval of the annual reports of the Audit Committee and Management Commission following the meeting of the Audit Committee in February. My office will be reaching out in the very near future to schedule the next meeting of the Management Commission. We now stand adjourned.